Franchises get complicated. A new idea comes out, then it gets refined, then it gets redefined, then it gets forced to meet the expectations of an ever-changing market, then it dies, and then it comes back to meet nostalgic needs. During this process, or better yet, in retrospect, it's easy to pick out the worst and best of the series. For example, Snake Eater is everyone's favorite, even the man himself.
God damn it!
And Survive is the black sheep, not even worthy of discussion. Outside of that, you have beloved spin-offs like Rising and a new appreciation for the out-of-the-box Metal Gear Solid 2. But then you have games that leave you split, because on the one hand, there are so many aspects that deserve the rank of best in the franchise, but then there's a lot that constitutes much of a series' lows. This brings us to Metal Gear Solid 5.
Subject on board. Leave the rest to us.
So let's go over all the good of Metal Gear Solid 5. The control scheme is the best it's ever been. CQC, shooting, sneaking, climbing, using the box feels better than ever before. The base design that you come across in the open world is top-notch, with areas like Kungenga Mine having that unique kind of circular shape where the enemies are on the outskirts and you're incentivized to sneak through the middle, which is usually like the no-go zone in stealth games. And then you have, areas like Shago Calais, which are very simple, easy to snipe, easy to infiltrate kind of tutorial type base. There's a good sense of progression. You start the game feeling very bare bones, but by the end of the game you have so many sandbox options that pretty much every approach is on the table. You have out-of-the-box gameplay, like seriously, the ways you could play Metal Gear Solid 5 are freaking crazy. Like, the things you can do with the cardboard box alone rivals the options in like any other competing stealth game. You have crazy, interesting side quests that carry the good parts of the Metal Gear Saga story package, like Paz and her whole story going on in Metal Gear Solid 5.
There's one more thing you have to do for me.
You can't keep me from getting drunk.
You have to forgive yourself for everything that went down the other day.
You're so annoying.
Yeah.
You have the buddy system, which implements someone actually helping you out during your infiltration in a very natural way. The high beats of the story are phenomenal, probably some of the best directed cutscenes in all of Metal Gear, and some of the best character moments as well. Customization, you get that up the ass with your base, with your guns, with the way Snake dresses and looks. You can even customize your buddies, like you get tons of options there, and that adds, for the next point, tons of replayability. Not just in the customization, but in the multiple approaches that you can bring to each base in each mission. So even if you're playing in the same area, it feels like a different experience because you could be doing something completely differently. You got some cool unlockables, like the Raiden outfit for example. You get this really nice kind of chill gameplay where if you're just wandering around in the open world, you can actually take it easy with this game. Use some overpowered weapons, play some music, and just have it be that 15 minutes of just chill fun that you might need at the end of the day after a hard day of work or school. The way this game balances lighthearted gameplay and a grim story is achieved in a way that I've only ever really seen something like Yakuza do, where you could have the most fucked up shit going on, but then while you're in the gameplay, you can just lift yourself right back up and it doesn't fuck up the pacing somehow. Venom Snake's character design is A tier. Like, I mean, I'd argue all the character designs in this game, aside from Skullface, are pretty top notch. You get some cool boss fights like Quiet, which I'd argue is arguably which I'd argue is the best sniper fight in the series. I made a video on that, you can go check it out. And then the online aspect. We haven't talked about Metal Gear Online at all, so let me talk about MGO 3. It honestly deserves its own kind of video for dissection, but this thing is actually pretty great. When me and my brother can manage to get a match with people online, it's a pretty well-balanced multiplayer. It cuts down on the sandbox elements, refining what they actually use there to give it more of a single purpose, more of a straightforward approach, whereas when I pick up certain weapons, I know exactly what they're used for. So for me, example, I utilize a sniper build because I like to counter all the really try-hard CQCs. Now, even though Metal Gear Online has a nice balanced firearm sandbox, it still has its issue with the meta in the sense of people running around invisible and just kicking your ass with CQC because they have better internet connection or they just got the timing down better than you. I like hopping online and countering this by just perching myself up somewhere, sniping these guys in the head or in the body or in the back, and just really fucking ruining their day. Like seriously, these guys will fucking rage at me and the entire team will ignore all of my compatriots and instead come directly for me. That's a pretty good fucking feeling. It carries that kind of versatility of gameplay from the campaign into the multiplayer, again with its own flaws with the meta, but we can talk about more on that in detail if you want me to. Yeah, you know what? If you want me to talk about MGO 3, let me know in the comments down below.
Location. Check all around the targets and plan carefully before moving in.
But for all the good that exists with Metal Gear Solid 5, there is also the bad. The unfinished story, the repetitive nature of gameplay, the reused bosses, lame villains, a broken sandbox that you can just, break right from the get-go. You get the legendary gunsmith, or you just rely on like headshot tranq weapons and you make the game an entire cakewalk. That hampers that otherwise pretty good sense of progression. There's no David Hayter. Hideo Kojima is a little bitch who's been trying to cheat David Hayter out of the role of Snake since Snake Eater. Honest to God, like what is your fucking problem? The enemies can be way too freaking easy and encourage the optimal strategy, which is again that tranq headshot meta. You have some grindy development cycles where you have to wait a long time for certain weapons to get finished. The mother base is bare bones outside of the pause side quests and the occasional Easter egg, and there's a lack of exploration in the open world, which we discussed in another video. Again, if you want to check that out, go right ahead. So in that sense there, Metal Gear Solid 5 has so much good going on, but at the same time it has so much bad. That's why I would call it the best worst game, because if someone said this was the best game in the franchise, I couldn't really, there's validity in that, but if someone says this is one of the worst games in the franchise, as much as I love Metal Gear Solid 5, I immediately understand where they're coming from. But while Metal Gear Solid 5 is deservingly considered the best worst game for having so much good and so much wrong happening at the same time, there's another game from a different franchise that somehow escapes this title. Halo Reach is a game that gets a lot of love from pretty much every corner of the internet. Even people who don't really like Halo will know and recognize Halo Reach. and its legendary status as being one of the best games ever made. However, I think it too is deserving of the title of Best Worst Game in its respective series. So, first off, for those of you that are not in the loop, let's go ahead and talk about why Halo Reach could be considered the best. First off, an amazing story that both acts as a prequel and a finale to everything that Bungie, the company that started Halo, had done with the series up until that point. On the one hand, you have this story that takes place right before Halo 1, so you already know how it's going to end if you have played Halo 1, but if you haven't, it kind of serves as a kind of best of roller coaster. Plus a lot of fan service with all the Spartans that are there and featured, and seeing the legendary Fall of Reach that's alluded to multiple times in the original trilogy. And it perfectly wraps up at the start of Halo 1, so it's a perfect finale and a perfect prequel. It easily has some of the best missions in the series. Two of which that I feel are worth mentioning here is Long Night of Solace, which sees you and your Spartan team discussing amongst each other how to fight the Covenant out in space by taking the ship, flying it out there, doing some dogfighting above the planet, raiding an enemy ship, breaking it down Star Wars Battlefront 2 style, to the point where you go into it, you invade it, you drop a bomb. You get like the best of everything here. Vehicular combat, close quarters combat, and then wide open spaces towards the beginning. From the beaches of Reach to outer space into the Covenant ship, the mission is just so well paced, and I should mention that the part where you're in the saber or longsword, I forget exactly what the ship is called, but the fighter, the shields and health mechanics of Halo translate perfectly into ship combat. So for example, with your ship you have your chain gun and you have your missiles. Your chain gun kind of acts as a way to destroy weaker ships or take out stronger ships with shields, and then your missiles can be used to wipe out a ship, specifically one of the stronger ships, and take out that ship once you've wiped out the shields with your chain gun. So in the same way a plasma pistol and DMR takes out shields and then finishes off the enemy, your chain gun and your missiles work in the same way, and this system functions flawlessly. If anything, I'd say this is one of the best examples of that shields and health philosophy implemented into Halo's gameplay. So the fact that Bungie tried this outer space combat mission for the first time and did so well is definitely worth mentioning. I made a video towards the start of my channel where I talk about how great New Alexandria is. Specifically the way that I think it's the closest that Halo got, at least during Bungie's time, to an open world. Basically, you start this mission and you're facilitating the evacuation of the city, but to do so you need to take out these jammers. Now there are 3 locations for the jammers, and the order in which you take them down are all randomized, and in between these different jammer locations there are randomized side objectives. This means that this mission could be played twice in a row without it playing out the same. It adds a level of freshness to this mission and allows you to come back. It's very open-ended in its exploration, in its combat, flying above the city or fighting inside the different interiors or even exterior rooftops is thrilling. And again, the fact that you can go at this and in such a free-form way is amazing, and this is why it's not only the best mission in Halo Reach, but one of the best missions period in the Halo franchise. There's also a crazy amount of Easter eggs here. I'm not gonna go through all of them because that would take me forever, but there's one where you can change the dynamic of one of the jammer locations from a fight with hunters to a club scene where the Covenant are all jamming out instead of fighting you. And that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg with this mission. There's so much to offer here, and there's so much replayability with this. The last mission plays out like this epic final stand, because at this point in the game, your Spartan is the last person alive on this planet. And there's nothing left to do at this point but fight amongst the ruins of the planet against the Covenant until you die. It's where that really cool survive meme originated from. But yeah, your Spartan basically fights here to the death, and it seems really grim with like your shattered helmet being in the glass planet. But then Dr. Halsey comes along and shows you the planet after the events of the original trilogy, where humanity has reclaimed Reach, and is starting to talk about how like your sacrifice was worth it, and although you died, she knows that when you closed your eyes, you would open them again and see white shores, a large green country, and Kofi Kingston with his hand extended towards you, forgiving and absolving you of all your sins, and ready to take you into paradise, because you were a true believer in Kofi. The customization in this game is amazing. If you know me, you know that I love bonus content, I love customization, I love unlocking stuff. And the armor unlocking here is so freaking cool. Basically, you have this point system where everything you do, whether it's the main campaign, the horde mode firefight, the multiplayer, or the map editor, playing those modes will all give you points. And with these points, you slowly level up and get the funds to purchase new armor pieces. Now, it's not purchasing like in Halo Infinite, Fortnite, or modern games where you're actually forking over more cash. It's in-game currency that you earn simply by playing. Yeah, games used to be like that. But yeah, this customization is amazing. There is so much you can do with your Spartan. You can recreate Daisy from Halo Legends. You can make a traditional Mark V Spartan in honor of Halo 1. Or you can make something all of your own. The sky is the limit. And in the multiplayer and in Forge, and even sometimes in Firefight, if you don't want to play as a Spartan, there's also elite armors that you unlock in unison with your Spartan armor. This is really cool, and this kind of system of unlocking things and customization can still be seen in some games today, like Resident Evil 8, where every mode you play gets you points through these challenges and all that kind of stuff. But that whole really cool method of unlocking new ways to play, new ways to look, new stuff, period, came from Halo Reach, and this system was just gold. Again, like, look at the diversity in these 3 different Spartans that I'm showing. Now, Forge is amazing. Forge World specifically allowed you to have this blank open canvas and design whatever map you want, whether it's big, whether it's small. I remember me and my little brother would be playing on Forge World forever, making maps that we knew nobody besides us would ever get to play because we didn't really have access to online play at that point when we were younger. But it was really freaking cool just making these giant sniper maps, or race car maps where you drove around in a warthog or a mongoose, or even maps where you'd fly around in ships and fight each other, and even just vibing. Like, Forge World is something really special. And while Halo Infinite's Forge is doing some new things that I really like, Halo Reach's Forge isn't tainted by 343 and all the issues that comes from modern gaming and how the industry works. It was a simpler time where you were just given all these tools right from the start, right when the game came out, and you could really create and play however you wanted. The Horde mode Firefight was pretty freaking great, not just because it allows you to play the gameplay loop of Halo, but because you could customize it to your liking. The objective, how long you would play, the enemies that would show up, the weapons they would use, the weapons you would use, the loadouts, the names of the loadouts, whether or not all the Spartans were a certain color with their armor or not. The sky was the limit. Again, just like Forge World, you could design Firefight to play exactly how you wanted to play. And of course, we can't forget split screen. Halo Reach is one of the greatest split screen games ever made, and the fact that you have Forge, Firefight, Campaign, Multiplayer, and they're all applicable with split screen, allowing you to play this with your friends, is amazing. And again, if you know me, you know how important split screen is to me. So at this point here, you must be thinking, Pliskin, this game sounds incredible. how could it be considered the best worst game? Let me explain. Now, if you know me, you know I am a stickler for sandbox balancing, and Halo Reach has the worst balanced sandbox in the entire Halo series.
I'd ask you if you have something on your mind, but I know the answer.
First off, the precision weapon meta is at its worst. If you're not using a gun that can scope in and shoot enemies from further away, on harder difficulties, you're gonna get your ass kicked. In the multiplayer, you're gonna get your ass kicked. In PvE modes like campaign and firefight, the enemies have tons of bullshit weapons. The concussion rifle, the fuel rod rifle are insanely unbalanced, and so many weapons get to wield these either grenade launcher or rocket launcher type weapons that can one-shot you without fair telegraphs, without, clear indicators of what kind of enemy it is. I mean, there's some times where you have the gold elites with the fuel rods, but they kind of blend in with all the other gold elites from far away. Then you have like the grunts that just completely blend in, and they have to you don't really realize they have a fuel rod until they start shooting at you. And while a rocket launcher type enemy isn't inherently bad, the fact that they can spam this thing in semi-auto rapid fire makes it incredibly unbalanced, and I've had times where I will rage quit just because of how poorly balanced the fuel rod gun is. You have the usual issues with, later Halos after Halo 1 with jackal snipers, but another big issue is melee with the elites. Now, an enemy sandbox is just as important as the weapon sandbox, and the elites in this game are also very broken. You see, in other Halo games, when an elite goes to hit you, there's a sound and a large wind-up before they can smack you. In Halo Reach, it happens in a frame that's less than a second and can instantly kill you. So even lower tier elites can just give you a good kick. All of a sudden, if you get too close, maybe you're trying to use the shotgun or play with the sword, and all of a sudden the elite will just kick you into the afterlife, and that is bullshit. Then of course you have enemies like skirmishers, which are just jackal snipers on steroids. So a jackal sniper at the very least had the weakness of not being very mobile and being incredibly weak when you caught up to them. Skirmishers, however, are extremely fast. They're jumping from rooftop to lower level, they can catch you no matter where you go, and they use DMR sniper type weapons like the needler rifle. So you have a sniper enemy that chases you down throughout the map. Basically, there's just a ton of enemies in this game and a ton of weapons in this game, in the multiplayer, in firefight, in campaign, that keep you from playing offensively, and Halo is all about the balance between shield, health, offense, defense, and using those shields and those health indicators to let you know when you can be on the offensive and when you need to be on the defensive. But in Reach, you almost always need to be on the defensive because you never know when a bullshit enemy is just gonna come out of nowhere. The multiplayer map design outside of cool Forge maps and custom games is pretty lame as well. Either the maps are reused from older Halo games, or they're just kind of these uninspired, boring sort of bleh. Again, some Forge World creations were really cool, but then you also got a lot of maps that were just these samey kind of gray hallway type setups, and that was really freaking boring. One of the coolest parts about the Halo universe is the visual variety in the multiplayer maps, campaign levels, firefight maps, all that kind of stuff. And while the firefight maps definitely have variety, the multiplayer maps are definitely a letdown. You have the introduction of Sprint here, which is controversial to this day. It really changed how multiplayer games would play out. It really changed what advantages and disadvantages you had. And the way it was implemented here in Reach was really stupid, because you could be sprinting, but if an enemy starts shooting at you, you take a good 2 seconds to be able to shoot back. So sprinting into an enemy basically meant dying, or just being caught sprinting meant dying. But at the same time, if you were too slow in certain campaign missions against certain enemies, they could just chew you apart, so sprint was needed. It was a very weird implementation of this, and to this day it's very jarring. Also, the breathing noise is incredibly annoying, erotic. I'm not sure what I want to call it. You also have Bloom. Bloom makes no sense. I understand that the multiplayer setup was changing and how first-person shooters was changing. However, Bloom is something that doesn't really belong in Halo because, first off, your reticle isn't like this imaginary thing that helps you shoot. It's basically like... it's supposed to simulate recoil or something like that, but in Halo you're not really supposed to have crazy recoil. And the guns aren't supposed to do that because you're a 7-foot tall super soldier. So these guns don't kick the same way they would with a normal Marine that was using them. This is sci-fi. This is high-tech technology that's, you know, having all the aiming pretty much done for you through your helmet, and that's why you immersively have the HUD and all this. So Bloom just kind of ruins that in like the worst way possible. So like MGS5, Reach has many pros, but it also has just as many pros as it does cons. Neither is a bad game, yet there is a case for why they could be the worst in the series. You know, Metal Gear Solid 5 for killing Metal Gear, being unfinished, all that kind of stuff, and then Reach for being the beginning of the end with the introduction of, you know, shittier sandbox elements and multiplayer design and sprint. But at the same time, you can't criticize anyone who says that these games are their favorite, because again, there is so much going on in these games for you to love. And I think that was a really interesting phenomenon and worth talking about. Can you think of another game besides Metal Gear Solid 5 and Halo Reach that would fit in this category? Do you agree or disagree of one of these games, you know, being in this category and they're either, you know, totally good or totally bad? And if you do feel like they fall into that category of worst and best, where do you tend to lean with Halo Reach and Metal Gear Solid 5? Let me know down in the comments below. This has been Pliskin. Over and out.
This is Solid Snake. Hey, subscribe to Pliskin Boy. God damn it.
You heard him.